once in a while, Chris Wallace makes a lot of sense on Fox News, and he does a pretty decent job challenging someone that he's interviewing. Case in point, his recent interview with Nick Mulvaney, who is the White House budget director. Now, Mulvaney went on Fox News expecting to, prop up their tax reform policy, but Chris Wallace actually challenged him pretty aggressively, and it was awesome. Now, it mostly had to do with the idea that the rich are not gonna get a tax cut, which we all know that's a lie, and the idea that the growth in the economy will help pay for the tax cuts that some Americans will get. Now, Chris Wallace isn't buying it, and he had the data to prove it.
The Nonpartisan Tax Policy Center did this analysis. It shows the middle fifth of households in America, those earning between $48,000 and $86,000 a year, they'll get an average tax cut of $660 next year. Meanwhile, the top 1%, people making more than $730,000 a year, will get an average tax cut of almost $130,000 next year. Now, I understand that this isn't done yet, that they're only basing it on the plan as it exists at this point. But according to their analysis, that middle fifth gets 1.5% of the total benefit of the tax cut, while the top 1% gets 8.5% of the benefit. That doesn't seem fair.
Sure, a couple of different things, and I obviously can't see the graph that you just put up, but I think that I have seen it previous to this. And what I think that particular organization did was, number one, they didn't do any dynamic scoring. If you go look at the details of what they put out, they assumed no benefit to the overall economy, which is just absurd to think that there won't be any.
But I'm not talking, sir, I'm not talking about the economy. I'm talking about the benefit to the individual family.
Let me finish.
The tax cut they get.
I got it, but let me go through. You can't look at the tax cut on a family until you realize how much better off they're going to be in a growing economy.
Okay, so let's break this down. First of all, even Chris Wallace's numbers don't do justice to the gross inequality that this tax cut presents. In fact, and they made a terrible mistake here. Some politically, the Republicans did, some people making between $100,000 and $300,000 will actually have their taxes increased. Now, they're not huge donors, but those are very politically relevant folks. The top 10%, this is borne out by a Princeton study, are a huge driver in policy. There's a lot more of them that are in positions of power. They might not be at the very top of the power echelon, but saying, hey, I'm gonna increase your taxes, but not the taxes of millionaires and billionaires. I'm gonna lower their taxes. That is a terrible political idea, and that was not in the chart because some taxes do get raised. And so then, secondarily, the top richest people in the country are actually going to get tens of millions of dollars in personal income cuts, let alone the benefits they get from the corporate tax cuts, the estate tax cuts, et cetera, which will get into the billions of dollars for some families. So even Chris Wallace's devastating chart was not devastating enough.
Right.
And then he goes to Mulvaney, and Mulvaney's answer is like, dynamic scoring, it's gonna be dynamic. So if you've never heard of that, that is the BS that Republicans use to say, yeah, it looks like we're giving a giant tax cut to the rich and you're getting squat, right? But don't worry, that will magically improve the economy so much that you won't be making $300,000 anymore, or $30,000, or wherever your income bracket was. Instead of making $300,000, you'll not be making $3 million and then getting tax cuts. The economy does not work that way. That's a unicorn, that's magic, that's nonsense.
So whenever I see this type of content on Fox News, like it appears pretty shocking, right? Because this isn't the kind of stuff that you would experience watching Fox. You would usually see them cheerleading whatever it is that Trump wants to do. But then I realized the reason why this will play well, this segment will play well with Fox's audience, is because Fox's audience isn't made up of millionaires and billionaires. Fox's audience is made up of people who were sick and tired of the system that we had in place before electing Trump. A lot of these people elected Trump, unfortunately, because they thought that he would be a little different, that he would shake up the system and actually look out for working class and middle class Americans. Now we know that that's not what he actually wants to do, but Fox is aware that their audience are not in favor of giving the most powerful, the most wealthy people gigantic tax cuts. And they're also not buying the whole trickle-down economics thing. I'm sure some are, but I think most Americans know through this massive long-term case study that we've had that we don't get trickled on, okay? And it's also incredibly insulting for us to like sit around and hope that these big corporations and these big CEOs will trickle on us.
Yeah, but there's an important part of that explanation, which is that, but Fox News used to not tell you that and not tell their audience that, even though it would be a popular position, even with their audience, as Anna rightly points out. It's because Roger Ailes used to run Fox News, and Roger Ailes is a Republican political operative. He worked for Nixon, Reagan, George H.W. Bush, and he helped George W. Bush as well. So he would lie to the audience over and over again and pretend the tax cuts for the rich would actually benefit them. Now that he's not there anymore, the Chris Wallace of the world, even though they're conservative, are free to go, wait a minute, here's something that doesn't actually help even our audience.
Right, and by the way, credit where credit is due, because Chris Wallace is wealthy. I mean, he's a host on Fox News. I'm sure that he will benefit from these massive tax cuts, and the fact that he challenged Mulvaney is something that deserves credit. So I just wanted to put that out there.
Agreed.
All right, let's go to the next video. There's more of this.
It's impossible to do what the National Tax Center just did. So my guess is, and I think that's the one that Jared Bernstein works for, it's not surprising that the former chief economist for a Democrat vice president doesn't like a Republican tax plan. So I don't put very much weight on that particular study.
It's a nonpartisan group, first of all, sir.
Okay, now they did math. Okay, I know that you have got a war on math. So their point is that, look, and could tax cuts stimulate the economy a little bit? Historically, they have not, as Chris Wallace is going to get into. So they're usually counterproductive when taxes are in fact this low for the rich, and they are. Especially when you put the loopholes in, they are at historically low rates. As a percentage of the taxes paid by the different brackets in America, historic lows. And when you cut taxes further, it's counterproductive. But even if it were to actually stimulate the economy, it would only do so by a little bit, right? Not by the gigantic factor that the Trump administration is putting. And the reason they do that is because they want to fudge the numbers. They're like, well, under this plan, we're never going to balance the budget. And because they don't care about balancing the budget, they just want to get the tax cuts to the rich. But they have to pretend to balance the budget for a number of reasons, including being able to pass it with just 50 votes instead of 60 votes. So it is super important to them to keep up that lie. And here's Chris Wallace breaking that lie apart. And I think the next clip is even better. So let's watch that.
The Senate Republican budget plan calls for a tax cut that is going to cost the Treasury $1.5 trillion over the next 10 years. And some outside experts say that the plan that was unveiled this week actually will add $2 trillion to the debt over the next 10 years. Now, back when you were in Congress, you were a deficit hawk. What happened, sir?
Let's talk about it, because I've been very candid about this. We need to have new deficits because of that. We need to have the growth, Chris. If we simply look at this as being deficit neutral, you're never going to get the type of tax reform and tax reductions that you need to get to sustained 3% economic growth. If we had been at 3% growth over the last 10 years, the budget very nearly would be balanced this year. That's how big a difference it makes when you grow the American economy, that additional 1% over 10 years. Over the next 10 years, if we can grow at 3% instead of the 1.8% that the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office says that we're going to grow at, and has been the average under the previous administration, if we can get to that 3%, it is $2 to $2.5 trillion worth of more government revenues. It's 12 million additional jobs, and those are 12 million jobs paying into Medicare, 12 million jobs paying into Social Security. Growth really is what's driving all of this, and growth is what our focus is, which is why we're willing to accept increased short-term deficits in exchange for that long-term payoff. Growth works. Doing in the administration to spur growth in terms of regulatory reform work. And what we're working on right now is to make sure that those tax cuts add to that.
Okay, so Obama, actually let's go back further. Clinton hands George W. Bush a surplus. Bush turns that into a $1.2 trillion deficit, okay? He hands that off to Obama. Obama cuts it in half. But the entire time that he's cutting the deficit, Nick Mulvaney is in Congress screaming, and that was what Chris Wallace was referring to, about we can't have any deficits. I can't believe Obama has deficits. Forgetting the fact that Bush handed him a $1.2 trillion deficit. Okay, but he has deficits, right? Now, you just heard him right there. He said, we need to have new deficits. Now that the Republicans are back in charge, deficits are wonderful. They grow their economy. Of course they're great. But this is actually part of a plan hatched by the Republicans under Nixon when Ailes was in the Nixon administration. And there are internal memos about it where they say, hey, let us, whenever we're in charge, let's spend a lot more money. Let's cut taxes so we can stimulate the economy. In their mind, to be fair to them, they thought stimulating the economy, cutting taxes would stimulate the economy. And they thought spending more stimulates the economy. So let's do it when the Republicans are in charge. But as soon as the Democrats gets in charge, make sure we yell and scream about deficits so they make the mistake of not stimulating the economy. And then we'll blame them for a poor economy. They've been playing this, and he just did it. The guy who was the biggest deficit hawk in Congress said we need new deficits.
I know, it's amazing. I feel like every time you say the word deficits, though, you have to do that hand gesture that you do. Deficits.
I didn't even realize I was doing it.
Always
That's
do that.
Awesome. Deficits. All right, I want to give Chris Wallace one more piece of credit here, and always credit where credit is due, no matter what has happened in the past. He pointed out later in the segment that Reagan tax cut back in 1981 that the Republicans love to crow about actually added $208 billion to the deficit. The dynamic scoring did not help with that deficit. It made it worse. And the Bush tax cuts in 2001 and 2003 added $1.5 trillion to our debt. It did not work. Dynamic scoring is total horse crap. And the reality is all it does is give tax cuts to the rich and saddle us with huge deficits and debt. Help us build independent media. Become a member of the Young Turks. TYTnetwork.com/join.